Alright, what's up everybody, back with another edition of Everyday Hoops. Hope you guys know what we're doing. Today we're doing part 2 of the Washington Wizards. Remember when, during the mid-2010s, the John Wall era Wizards. We did part 1 on Friday. If you guys missed that, you can go back and watch that one. But yeah, we're doing part 2 of this one. So yeah, this was going to be kind of the end, quote-unquote, of the John Wall and Bradley Beal era in Washington. What happened and led to that? Thank you guys for the views on videos in the shorts recently. Really appreciate it. If you do like the content around here, consider subscribing, like, turn notifications to all stuff like that. I'd really appreciate it. Really helps out a lot. And yeah, I don't want to waste any more of your time. Let's get right into it. So we left off at the end of the 2014-15 season. The Wizards were eliminated in the second round of the playoffs for the second year in a row by the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, the Atlanta Hawks. So down 2 years in a row in the NBA playoffs, in the second round of the playoffs, just 2 wins away from making it to the conference finals. With this still young core of Wall and Beal in them, it was time for the Wizards to act. It was time for the Wizards to keep this up, and expectations obviously growing for this young team. Going to the 2015 offseason, the draft, they had the 19th overall pick and selected point guard Jaren Grant from Notre Dame, but he would not stay there long, as their Wizards were involved in a 3-team trade on NBA draft night that involved the Atlanta Hawks and the New York Knicks. The Wizards would trade Grant and a 2019 second round pick to the Atlanta Hawks, which then he got flipped to the New York Knicks, and the Wizards acquired 15th overall pick Kelly Oubre out of Kansas from the Atlanta Hawks. Oubre was an energetic wing, very athletic, could score in the paint, had good defensive tools, and of course, within this team, you need as many wings as you can get. He had a very quiet offseason as well. Their signings, they signed Gary Neal and re-signed veteran Drew Gooden, and they also made a trade to acquire veteran forward Jared Dudley from the Milwaukee Bucks, but unfortunately wasn't all amazing, as their starting small forward from last season, Paul Pierce, would leave Washington and go to the LA Clippers. The aging veteran wanted to go and win one more ring before he retired. So unfortunately, they lost the starting small forward, as the year before this, remember, they did trade away Trevor Ariza, but now it was time for their 3rd overall pick from a few years ago, Otto Porter, to step up and take that starting spot. The Wizards were still expected to be comfortably in the playoff mix, but unfortunately, things didn't turn out great. They started the season off 9-12, 11th in the Eastern Conference. Not a great start to the year, losing a lot of kind of easy games. Now, of course, their schedule wasn't that easy. They had teams like the Celtics, the Raptors, teams like that a few times, but things just did not start off well in the 2016 season. And to make things worse, their number 2 guy, Bradley Beal, on December 11th, a game against the New Orleans Pelicans, he would be ruled out of the game. At first, it was just due to leg soreness, but then after that, an MRI revealed that he had the beginnings of a stress reaction in his left fibula, and he would miss the next 16 games for the Washington Wizards. A big blow to their team early in the year. In those 16 games, the Wizards went 8-8, ended up with a 17-19 record on January 11, 2016, good for 11th in the Eastern Conference. But now Beal was back, and it was time to step things up, and they're in the middle of a winning streak, so things should be able to get better, right? Well, not really. They then went 6-9 throughout their next few games to enter the All-Star break with a 23-28 record, 10th in the Eastern Conference, 3 games back at the 8th seed. Things were not looking amazing in Washington, but they now had a full second half of the season to kind of come back and re-energize themselves. Bradley Beal was healthy, and hopefully they can come in and just win some more games. And they also try to bolster this by making a move at the trade deadline, trading away DeJuan Blair, Chris Humphries, and a 2016 first-round pick to the Phoenix Suns to bring in forward Markieff Morris. It seems the Wizards like making deals with the Suns. A few years ago, they made the trade to get Marcin Gortat, which really benefited them, and now making the trade to get Markieff Morris. Of course, to help with that wing depth, obviously, with a lot of their wings leaving and just not being as good. Markieff was still kind of young and brought a really good presence to this Wizards team, and it looked like it was going to work. They went 7-2 coming out of the All-Star break to get their record up to 500 at 30-30, tied for 9th in the East, and just a half a game back at that 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. A very tight race at the end of that Eastern Conference that season. You know, the Wizards look like they're going to jettison themselves back into the competition. But at the end of the year, just like they have in the past few years, very, very streaky. They went on a 5-game losing streak after getting to 30-30, but then they went on a 5-game winning streak to combat that to get back to 500 at 35-35, 10th in the East and a game and a half out of the 8th spot. And then the streakiness began again. They then lost 4 of their next 5 games and dropped the record to 36-39, 10th in the East and now 3.5 games back of the AC with just not that much time left to go. It was going to be really, really tough for the Wizards to get in, but there's a chance. But unfortunately, that ended quickly. On April 8th, they lost the game 112-99 in Detroit to the Pistons. And that was big because they were fighting with the Pistons for that last playoff spot. With the Pistons winning that game, they would knock Washington down. But then also, they were battling with the Indiana Pacers at this point. The Pacers, in the 3-game series they played against each other, the Pacers won 2 of those 3 games. The Pacers had the tiebreaker, and unfortunately that would eliminate the Washington Wizards from playoff contention. They finished the season 41-41, 10th in the East, still a 500 team, but not being able to make the playoffs. And they're very disappointing season in Washington. Of course, injuries also said Bradley only played in 55 games, which is really big, but just a kind of a setback for this Wizards team. After that season, Randy Whitman, after 4 years of being the head coach of the Wizards, was fired, but then in came Scott Brooks. Brooks was fired after the 2016 season by the Oklahoma City Thunder after they blew a 3-1 lead in the conference finals to the Golden State Warriors. But Brooks had a really good resume, bringing the Oklahoma City Thunder to NBA Finals in 2012 and for them being a consistently really good team in the West and a contender at that point in the West. So why not bring him over to Washington with another young team trying to really take their team to the next level? It looked like a really good move at this point. Now we go into the 2016-17 season. In the offseason for 2016, the Wizards cleaned house, brought in a lot of new faces. In free agency, they were very busy signing Andrew Nicholson, Jason Smith, Ian Mahimi, Tomas Satoransky, and Marcus Thorne, a lot of veteran players there. They also made a trade to acquire former lottery pick Trey Burke from the Utah Jazz. Now, they did lose out on some guys that have been staples in Washington. They had lost on Jared Dudley, Ramon Sessions, Drew Gooden, and their starting power forward, Nene, would leave as well. But they remember the Markieff Morris trade from last year. He was going to step up and step into that role. But their biggest move of the 2016 offseason was signing their guy Bradley Beal, who has been playing really well in the last few years and looked like he's going to keep taking really good steps. They signed Beal to a 5-year, $127 million extension. Big money. Big money, Brad. Yeah, we know Bradley gets his money. It looked like a very solid move for the Wizards at this time. I mean, of course, they're going to have to pay some other guys later down the line, but for right now, what this young Wizards team is, for Beal being so young, for what he's already done for this Wizards team, it made sense. The 2017 season was all about redemption. Missing the playoffs the year prior, Beal got paid, brought in a lot more veterans, a new head coach, refreshing Washington. Let's go out and do this thing. They started the season off not great once again, starting 6-12, 13th in the East. Things just weren't really clicking for this Wizards team. But then a switch flipped just like that once it got to December, and they then went 15-8 to get their record up to 23-20 by mid-January. They move up to 5th in the Eastern Conference, and they didn't stop there as they then won 11 of their next 12 games, including a 7-game win streak in that point to enter the All-Star break with a 34-21 record, 3rd place in the Eastern Conference, and John Wall was once again named to the All-Star team. The Wizards really hit their stride. It took a little bit to really find this team. Of course, a lot of new faces, new coach, kind of took a while to adapt, but once they did, they hit their ground running. John Wall was having the best year of his career. Bradley Beal was having the best year of his career. Otto Porter was having a great season. Their bench was really solid. A team that wasn't really known for their offense, more of a defensive team, was now really starting to tap into that offense, and Scott Brooks was a big part of that. And they were not done making moves. At the trade deadline, they really went all in for it, trading away Andrew Nicholson and Marcus Thorne, 2 players who they signed that free agency, and a 2017 first-round pick, to the Brooklyn Nets to acquire wingman Bojan Bogdanovic and Chris McCullough as well. Bogdanovic is a very solid wing. At this point, he has some good years in the league. And what helped the offense for the Washington Wizards was a wing that can shoot the 3 ball, but also go get his own bucket as well. This was a big sign for the Wizards saying, we need some help on the wing position. We really think we have a good offensive team. We have a good team all around. Let's keep it moving. Wasn't all great though, because what it's like for every second half of the season for the Washington Wizards, apparently it got very streaky. They lost 3 of their first 5 games coming out of All-Star break, but then they won their next 5 games to get to 41-24, second place in the Eastern Conference, which is the highest point they were at the entire season. Second in the East, the Washington Wizards. When's the last time you heard that? But then after the 5-game winning streak, they would lose 4 of their next 5 games, and then win their next 4 games, and then they would lose their next 3 games. It was a really weird time in Washington. They were really streaky and very mid-franchise. After the 3-game losing streak, they're 46-31, fourth in the Eastern Conference. Not in contention for the top, but still a very good record. They then won 3 of their last 5 games and finished the season with a 49-33 record, one of their best records in a very, very, very long time, finishing with the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. This was an amazing season, one of the best seasons in recent Washington Wizards history. John Wall broke out, averaging 23 points, 4 rebounds, and almost 11 assists per game with 2 steals, and claiming a spot in the All-NBA 3rd team. Bradley Beal, in the first year of his new extension, really took another step as well, averaging 23 points, 3 rebounds, and 3.5 assists with a steal, shooting 48% from the field and 40% from 3. Markieff Morris, now a full-time starting power forward and first full year in Washington, averaged 14-6 with a steal on 45% shooting and 36% from 3. Otto Porter even took a big step now as a new established starting small forward in Washington, averaging 13-6 with 1.5 steals while shooting 51% from the field and 43% from 3. Bojan Bogdanovic in his 26 games in Washington made his impact felt, averaging 12 points and 3 rebounds on 45% shooting and 39% from 3. And good old Marcin Gortat averaged 10 points and 10 boards on 58% shooting from the field. The Wizards, who again the last few years held their hat on the defensive end, flipped it around. They are now the 7th best offense in the league, as that defense kind of took a dip, 20th in the league, but still having a really good offense and a defense that could lock in when it really needed to. This was a really good Wizards team and not one to take lightly. In the first round of the 2017 playoffs, they got their chance at revenge, taking on the number 5 seed in the Eastern Conference, the Atlanta Hawks. If you remember, the Hawks were the team that eliminated when they last were in the playoffs in 2015, their 60-win team. This Hawks team was a lot different. They were down to 43 wins, and a lot of players from that 2015 team were no longer there. There's a new era in Atlanta, led by Paul Millsap, Dwight Howard, and Dennis Schroeder, and Tim Hardaway Jr. There's a lot of change going on in Atlanta, but they're still a very solid team that the Wizards were going to have to go through. In Game 1, the 3rd quarter was a big decider as the Wizards outscored Atlanta 38-28 in the 3rd and rode that to a 114-107 Game 1 win. John Wall had an amazing first game, finishing with 32 points and 14 assists on 12 for 24 shooting, doing everything on the court. While Beal also put in 22 and Markieff Morris has 21, as 6 players scored in double digits for Washington, and that gave them a 1-0 series lead. In Game 2, after Atlanta had a big 3rd quarter after a close first half, Washington had to fight their way back in the 4th quarter, and their bench really had a big spark in this game, as Brandon Jennings and Jason Smith would come in and hit some shots to tie this game up. And at the end, it was John Wall who took over, while Bradley Beal hit some big shots to help this team out. And the Wizards would take Game 2 109-101. The duo of Wall and Beal dominated, both having over 30 points in this game. Marcin Gortat at 14-10 with 5 blocks, and Brandon Jennings put in 10 off the bench. The Wizards now held a 2-0 series lead going back to Atlanta. These were big games. If you remember the first part of this video, the Wizards were a really good team on the road in the playoffs the last few years, so maybe it would stick over to this year, right? Well, not really. The Hawks got off to a great start in the third game, putting up 38 points in the first quarter, and the Wizards were not able to come back from it, as Atlanta took Game 3 comfortably, 116-98. John Wall put up 29 points, but it was a tough day for everybody else, as Beal shot just 6 for 20, Markieff Morris was 4 for 14, and it was a real struggle to get the Wizards into the game, while Paul Millsap at 29 for 14 and 5 for Atlanta. There's now a 2-1 series. In Game 4, after Washington put up 35 on Atlanta in the first quarter, they would struggle to score throughout the second quarter as Atlanta outscored them 31-15 in the second. After the Wizards came back in the third quarter, came down to the wire in the fourth quarter, but Atlanta would just be a better shot-making team in that quarter, outscoring Washington 34-24, and Atlanta would take Game 4 111-101. This time Bradley Beal was the one with the big game with 32 points, while Walt put in 22, 5, and 10. Marshall Gortat had 18 rebounds. It just was not enough as Atlanta had 7 players scoring double digits, and the series was now tied at 2 going back to Washington. This is a big Game 5. In the 2-2 series, Game 5 is important, obviously. This game was a dogfight all the way to the end. The start of the fourth quarter was a deciding factor as Bojan Bogdanovic, Brandon Jennings, and Marcin Gortat were really the big factors in this game, hitting big shots to start the quarter and ride that all the way to the end as defense took into place in the last few minutes, and Washington would win Game 5 at home 103-99 behind Bradley Beal's 27, John Wall's 26 and 14 assists, and Otto Porter's 17 points, while Bojan Bogdanovic put up 14 off the bench. The Wizards had a chance to close this series out, get revenge on the Hawks in Game 6 in Atlanta. It was not going to be easy, but there is a way. Washington had a big second quarter, outscoring Atlanta 35-23. Even though Atlanta did make a big comeback in that third quarter and making it a 3-point game at many points in time, John Wall closed this game out, scoring the last 12 points in 4.5 minutes for the Washington Wizards to close out Atlanta and win Game 6, 115-99. Wall finished with 42 points and 8 assists in absolutely dominant fashion, while Bradley Beal chipped in with 31 and Markieff Morris had 17. In that series, John Wall probably had his best playoff series up to this point in his career, finishing averaging over 29.5 points and 10 assists per game, while Bradley Beal averaged just under 26 points per game. The duo was establishing themselves as one of the best guard tandems in the league. Unfortunately, that 4-5 matchup comes with a cost, as for the third straight time, the Wizards will have to face the number 1 seed in the East in the second round, and this time it was the Boston Celtics, the 53-win team. This team was led by Isaiah Thomas, having one of the best seasons we've seen in recent history, averaging just under 29 points per game and being one of the best players in the league. They just won a first-round series against the Chicago Bulls, and it was going to be a very tough matchup for Washington, but maybe they could do it. And it looked like maybe Washington could put them on upset alert. The Wizards outscored Boston 38-24 in Game 1 of the first quarter, but the third quarter was the downfall as Boston outscored Washington 36-16 in the third and would cruise to a 123-111 win in Game 1 over Washington. Bradley Beal put up 27 points. John Wall had 20 and 16 assists. Otto Porter and Marcin Gortat each had 16, but just was not enough for Isaiah Thomas' 33. And Jay Crowder and Al Horford also combined for 43 points. When that happens, you probably aren't going to win that many games. But there's still a Game 2. Game 2 was an amazing game. You guys probably remember this game because this was a game where Isaiah Thomas put on one of the greatest performances we've seen. You guys probably know the story, but if you don't know, Isaiah Thomas' sister unfortunately passed away earlier before the game in a car accident, and Thomas would play for her and put on a ridiculous performance. But if you don't remember, this was a very tight game as well. Washington came out hot, putting up 42 points in the first quarter on Boston. But of course, Isaiah Thomas' superpowers let him lead the Celtics back into this game. The Wizards start off the third quarter very hot, but of course, Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder hitting big shots will get this game back into it. Otto Porter hit a big 3-pointer with 33 seconds left to give the Wizards a 2-point lead. After that, the Wizards wouldn't be able to get an offensive rebound. Isaiah Thomas eventually got fouled and hit both free throws to tie the game at 1:14 with 14 seconds left. The last possession, John Wall and Bradley Beal would both miss jumpers, and the game will go into overtime. And in overtime, Isaiah Thomas scored 10 points in that OT, including putting away the game with a couple huge shots and free throws, and the Celtics would take Game 2 129-119. Isaiah Thomas finished with 53 points in this game, but If you don't remember, John Wall was amazing as well, finishing with 40 and 13 assists on 16 for 32 shooting, while 7 players scored in double figures for Washington. Isaiah Thomas put the team on his back and could not be stopped that night. Down 2-0, but we're going back to Washington. So things should be different, huh? And it was. Washington again got off to an amazing start, outscoring Boston 39-17 in the first quarter, and they rode that all the way to a comfortable 116-89 win over the Celtics to win their first game of the year for the series. John Wall put up 24 points, while Otto Porter and Bojan Bogdanovic each had 19, and all 5 starters scored in double digits for Washington. It was now a 2-1 series. In Game 4, even though Washington got off to a good start, in this one, it was the third quarter where Washington put up 42 in the third on Boston and cruised to a 121-102 victory to tie the series up at 2. Bradley Beal put up 29 points, while John Wall had 27, 12 assists, and 5 steals, while Otto Porter also had 18 points in this one. The series is now, just like that, tied back at 2 against the number 1 seed in the East, going back to Boston Game 5. A huge Game 5, Boston took advantage. Boston was the one that came out in the hot start, outscoring Washington 33-21 in the first quarter. And even though Washington tried their hardest, it just was not enough, as Boston would not stop putting it on them. And the Celtics won Game 5 123-101. John Wall put up 21. Beal had a tough shooting out at 7 for 19. And it was just a tough night as the Wizards could not stop Avery Bradley, who put up 29 points. And the Celtics would take a 3-2 series lead and went back to Washington. Wizards had their backs to the wall. It was 3-2 against the number 1 seed in the East. It was not going to be easy, but the thing is, they were at home, so they had the crowd advantage on their side. Game 6 came down to the wire. It was very, very close throughout the entire game. John Wall had 2 free throws left and 41 seconds left to tie the game 87. After, Avery Bradley hit a shot to make a 2-point lead, and Bradley will come right back with his own to tie the game 89. Al Horford hit a shot off Isaiah Thomas' feed with 8 seconds left to make it 91-89 Boston. Now the next possession, John Wall hit a cold-blooded 3-pointer with 4 seconds left to give Washington a 92-91 lead, an outstanding moment for John. Isaiah Thomas would miss a 3 at the buzzer, and the Wizards stay alive and force a Game 7, winning Game 6 92-91. Bradley Beal finished with 33 points, while John Wall had 26 points, and Markieff Morris had 16 and 11. This was it. Game 7 in Boston against the number 1 seed. The Wizards had a chance to knock off the Boston Celtics and hold a meeting with the Cleveland Cavaliers and LeBron James. The Wizards had a chance to make their first conference finals appearance since 1979. It has been 38 years at this point that the Washington Wizards have made it to a conference finals or even an NBA finals, which what they made in 1979 when they won 54 games. This was unmarked territory for the Wizards. I mean, most of the Wizards fans at this point hadn't even seen the 1979 team. At that point, they weren't even the Wizards, they were the Washington Bullets, like Elvin Hayes and Wes Unseld. That was the last time the Wizards were in this position. With one win, they could write their names into the Washington Wizards franchise history books. It was a close, very exciting game, but the end of the third and start of the fourth was the downfall. The Celtics went on a 15-2 run from 101 in the third to 10 minutes in the fourth. And the Wizards, even though they did fight back and make it a 4-point game at one point, Kelly Olynyk's big shots and the Wizards just turning the ball over at the end of the game could not get it done. And the Celtics would take Game 7, 115-105. Despite Bradley Beal's 38, Otto Porter's 20, John Wall's 18 and 11 assists, it couldn't be Isaiah Thomas's 29 and 12 assists, and Kelly Olynyk's crazy 26 points off the bench. And the Celtics would unfortunately knock the Wizards out. 3 times in the last 4 years, the Wizards were this close to making it to the conference finals, but just not being able to do it. But we still have John Wall, we still have Bradley Beal, we still have some solid things. Maybe next year will be the year. And that's going to be the end of part 2 of the Wizards video. There'll be a part 3 out on Tuesday. Thank you guys for watching. Once again, if you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing, like, turn notifications on, stuff like that. I really appreciate it. Really upset a lot. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow.